I'll say this now, shit just got real. Things are about to get pretty interesting in the world of shared world, always online loot shooter games, because we're about to see 3 games of the same genre go head to head to head. And no, that is not a euphemism for the YouTube author rubbing 2 dildos against himself before going to fuck himself. Now, I just want to be clear and upfront about this. This is not about which game is better, which game has been better, who's the most competent studio, or even comparing the games against each other outright. For the most part, Anthem is going to constantly be compared to Destiny for the next 6 months or so. Both games are pretty much in direct competition with one another, but that's not what this video is for. This is about how the competition between the games is going to be a good thing for gamers. Well, it's going to suck for your social life if you like all 3. But for the most part, it's going to be a good thing for gamers because we're going to have options at this point. Competition between gaming studios usually leads to better games, and there are plenty of examples of that in gaming history that shows competition can actually benefit the player and the gamer. However, there are also some examples of how competition can lead to the downfall of a competitor, and the best examples of this to look at are sports games. For years, EA and 2K games released annual sports franchises against one another, as well as some other studios that were releasing some sports games in that time. You had NBA Live versus NBA Shootout, Madden versus 2K, FIFA versus Pro Evolution Soccer. You want to throw in MLB The Show versus MLB 2K. There was also that competition. And some of the greatest sports games ever made, renowned in the years they were released, came during the years that the 2 studios were competing for fans' attentions. NFL 2K5 is probably the most revered football game seen outside of Tecmo's Super Bowl. Hey man, you can't fuck with Bo Jackson. But 2K was steadily releasing a better product than EA's Madden, but Madden kept improving their games. Each year, a studio would launch a new feature, improve the mechanics, the movement, graphics, and the studios basically pushed the limits of what they can do each year to win the fans over. NHL was similar, with EA and 2K fighting for supremacy. Go down the list, you'll see just how many times a new feature was created during the years they were directly competing against one another. It was a glorious time to be a sports gamer because you knew features of the games were constantly improving one year after another. Unfortunately, the competition had mass casualties. Each studio, for various reasons, gave up their version of a sports game for things that were either within their control or out of their control. EA gave up on a fantastic baseball series after just one game, MVP Baseball, after years of running the Triple Play series. The Triple Play series wasn't very good, but MVP Baseball was fucking amazing. And all that happened because 2K got the sole rights to make baseball games. Why did 2K do that? Well, that was a retaliation move because the prior year, EA locked up football with the Madden series, shutting down what was perceived to be the better football series that 2K was running. EA could not beat 2K in terms of quality, so what did? They went the direct route to the NFL and got an exclusive license. And even after that, 2K had baseball rights for years. They didn't have the rights from Sony, though, who could produce a first-party studio baseball game. And sure enough, MLB The Show had been the dominant baseball game for years. So much so that 2K stopped making baseball games even with the exclusive license. They got their ass kicked so bad that they stopped making games just because they knew they could not compete with Sony's first-party studio that absolutely destroyed them. Although the competition was fantastic for years with innovations, new improvements to the games, in the end, there were winners and losers. Some of the studio losers ended up losing their series, and the unfortunate side effect is that there hasn't been any direct competition to existing franchises. There is little evolution right now at this point in either one of these franchises. MLB The Show was always the better game, and it is still fantastic. But without competition right now, there's really no incentive to push themselves. So the game kind of feels stagnant if you buy it year after year. Madden has had competition in over 10 fucking years. And they only make minimal improvements each and every year, with major improvements coming every 3 or 4 years or so. It's just the way the industry has changed. If you look at the NBA and NHL franchises, both studios ended up dropping their version of the game because the other studio absolutely kicked their ass. 2K and EA both still have the basketball license. However, 2K is absolutely dominating EA in the basketball market right now. On the flip side, EA utterly fucking curb stomped 2K when it came to the NHL game. EA's NHL version is by far a superior hockey game, so much so that 2K absolutely dropped the series because it wasn't selling and they couldn't compete with EA on that market. So even when they have the rights to games, they realize, you know what, we're fighting an uphill battle. Let's just focus on the games that we know we can do better than our opponent. You also have shooter genres that have also pushed each other each and every year, even to this date. While Call of Duty is always seen as the sales king each year, Battlefield was always known to push the boundaries of what their multiplayer could do when it comes to putting everything into one map. Call of Duty would also take ideas from other shooter games and add that to their versions each and every year, such as when Homefront came up with the concept of building towards a kill streak or vehicle. Call of Duty would go on to borrow that idea where they had those support kill streaks. Halo's theater mode, stolen by Treyarch and then added to Black Ops. Treyarch stealing Destiny Supers and then adding that to Black Ops 3. Treyarch stealing Battle Royale and giving the ideas to Black Ops 4. What the fuck? What hasn't Treyarch stolen at this point, man? Now, in the same vein, other shooter games that try to enter the market, know they're going to be going up against Call of Duty, realize they need to attempt something different in order to compete. Rainbow Six Siege had the unique idea of a breach and neutralized game where you could see from actual SWAT groups taking down acts of terrorists or criminals. That's actually grown into a very lucrative business for them. Other games, though, weren't so successful that also tried to copy on Call of Duty's ideas. Years ago, Resistance 2 had an idea of what they wanted in Resistance Fallen Man, but then when Resistance 2 came out, what did they do? They copied Call of Duty's formula, and nobody really liked that multiplayer. And that was over 10 fucking years ago. Then you have Crysis. They added their ideas for multiplayer with tiered perks, similar to what you would see in a Call of Duty game. The first-person shooter market has two main annual, biannual franchises. Call of Duty is going to release every year, and then Battlefield seems to be releasing every second or third year, and that's after Star Wars Battlefront was thrown into the rotation. Any games looking to get into the more realistic shooter genres know they're competing against these two games each and every year, regardless of how much they're going to try and avoid it. And whether they find success always hinders on the success of Call of Duty and Battlefield. Games like Killzone, Titanfall, they kind of got lost in the shuffle, even though they're a little bit more futuristic. Halo comes out every 3 to 4 years, and the funny thing is, now it struggles to get a foothold in the shooter market. Years ago, Halo dominated it. But what happened? Call of Duty went ahead, Battlefield pulled ahead. Now, Halo struggles to stay in third simply because they're only on one console. Another example, outside video games completely, that shows how competition can be pushed, is wrestling. You're damn right I said it. Wrestling, motherfucker. Years ago, and this was probably the last times I actually watched wrestling, was when WCW gave WWE a run for their money. They had the NWO storylines on Monday Nitro, and they started kicking the ass of the once dominant WWE. WCW started stealing wrestlers, having old school wrestlers return, while WWE had Stone Cold, The Rock, DX, and Vince McMahon carry their shows. But WCW was running out all kinds of new characters with the NWO storyline. Each week, it was a ratings war. For over a year, WCW was beating the shit out of WWE. Badly, I might add. Not by a little bit. They were fucking curb stomping the shit out of them. But, much like sports games though, WCW couldn't maintain their lead, and WWE managed to capture their crown back just a few years later. And then ultimately, Vince bought WCW after the company pretty much ran itself into bankruptcy by pissing all that money away. Then when Vince got it, he decided to cancel the motherfucker so he wouldn't have any competition, blah, 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 blah. If you follow wrestling, you have an idea of what happened back all those years. Since that time, when Vince McMahon decided to close down WCW, WWE has not fully reached that level of success they had when they were directly competing with WCW. They haven't been able to do it because they haven't had a competition to push the limits of what the storylines would be each and every year. Not from a rating standpoint, from a money-wise standpoint, yes, but certainly not from the viewing numbers since that time. So circling this all back to Destiny, Anthem, and The Division, for the first time, they will be going head-to-head in what is probably the console's most time-consuming gaming market possible. Holy fucking shit, man. Destiny and The Division show that in order to have success in both games, investing a lot of time is necessary to take on all the content that a game has to offer. These games are not like God of War or Assassin's Creed, where you invest 25 hours to beat the game, then an optional 60 to 100 hours collecting every fucking thing and trophy and achievement in the goddamn game. No. It's not Call of Duty or Battlefield, where the countless hours you spend online is just beating other people in PvP. Sure, they have rank ups online, but essentially the whole point of playing online is the changing concept of game-to-game versus new competition. Same with Battle Royale games, which is a similar time investment as a Call of Duty Battlefield type game, where each lobby is going to be a different experience online. The shared world loot genre is a weekly reset world that keeps this carrot on a string in front of you so that you keep coming back for more shit. Destiny has had a 1.5 year head start on The Division before it released, and frankly, they both actually struggled at their launch. When The Division came out, Destiny was in a low period of DLC, and the updates really didn't offer much content. When Rise of Iron came out, The Division was in a shitty place where they needed to delay content in order to fix the game, so they never truly went head-to-head one another, because even as Destiny 2 came out, The Division was experiencing a revival due to Bungie's confusing decisions regarding Destiny 2. BioWare has had the chance to sit back and see what mistakes both franchises made, and if they learned anything, it's to not make the same mistakes with Anthem and produce a game that avoids all the pitfalls of its competition. With the release dates of all things announced at E3, we know exactly when they will be competing against one another. Anthem is going to be launching February 22nd, 2019. A month later, on March 15th, The Division 2 will be launching, and while we don't know the date, you can pretty much guess that Destiny 2 is going to launch the second portion of their annual pass update to the Forsaken DLC around the beginning of March or so, and that one's called Joker's Wild. If you were to go by the actual release date, the date hasn't been announced, obviously, but you can kind of guess it's going to be in early March, because if Destiny wants to launch 4 pieces of content starting in September, that means there's going to be a 3-month gap before the next cycle. So Forsaken launches in September, Black Armory is going to launch in December, Joker's Wild is going to launch in March, and then Penumbra is going to launch in June. Those are just guesses, and there's no concrete evidence that points towards that, but chances are those are some fairly accurate timeframes. Destiny will be getting its first real dose of competition. Anthem is undoubtedly targeting Destiny fans. The Division 2 avoids the whole spacefaring, alien-type game, but it still shares many fans with Destiny. And you have to imagine the DLC and the release of The Division 2 are going to be within 2 weeks of one another. So they're going to be competing directly for one another when it comes to new content. And you can be damn sure to expect all 3 studios pay attention to what their competition is doing. Because if they find success with something, you know that's going to be coming to their game. And a perfect example of that was The Division. They had the Dark Zone, which is a player versus AI environment. What is Destiny 2 launching in the Forsaken? Player versus AI with that game mode called Gambit. Is it identical to the Dark Zone? No, of course not. It's completely different. But you can see how those 2 game modes are very similar to one another, where you take on other players and the environment all together in one section. Anthem sees that one of the major complaints of Destiny is the reskinning and rescaling of boss fights. Most boss fights are just larger versions of normal bosses. So their trailer shows that some environment animals are a threat, and you will need to fight those motherfuckers. That's something Destiny just doesn't do. Anthem and The Division will both have optional matchmaking for every activity. Unlike Destiny that doesn't, which you can already see the wheels in motion, though, that they're going to probably change that in the future. The more each studio creates that pushes the envelope for games, the more the other studios are going to see something popular and will want a version of theirs for that their fans can play it in their game. It's going to be a fantastic time for gamers, seeing each studio innovate only for the other studios to copy that idea and try to improve upon it, and then turn around and add something that the other games don't have. Expect a bit of new features for Anthem, and then The Division, and then you're going to see what Destiny 2 comes up with. Expect Destiny to finally get off their ass now that there's some real competition in their genre and their market, because we see a direct threat to their market share. There's no more comparisons to games that have somewhat similar connections to the pieces of Destiny. Anthem is that direct competition in the player versus environment section. I don't believe Anthem is going to have a PvP section, but essentially the environment section with the player versus AI in a co-op market, that is direct competition. Now, on the flip side, because obviously this needs to be mentioned, competition is going to claim at least one of these games. The writing is on the wall, and there is no question about that. Not all of these franchises are going to survive. Now, there's no point in attempting to predict which one it's going to be, because each one of these games does have positive and negatives associated with it. But just for math alone, something has to give. Destiny and The Division already ask for significant weekly time investments from their players in order to obtain the best loot. I'm pretty sure Anthem will follow that same weekly loop to keep people coming back. Are there enough gamers and enough money to keep all three of these games alive? Can all three coexist with one another? I'm going to venture to guess, probably not. As someone who is interested in all three, and I wish I could play all three, I know I can't be the only one out there thinking, how the fuck can I do all the weekly shit on just 2 games, let alone 3? How can I maximize my time on all the games, which is going to be a challenge for just 1 game, let alone 3 fucking games? I can't see people being fully able to play all 3 games, unless you're one of those professional couch potatoes sitting on your ass playing video games all day. But I'm fairly certain normal people are going to have to choose between the 3. They're going to have to be in competition for our attention, and they need to be at the top of their game in order to keep our attention playing their product. If you want people to play your game instead of your competition's game, then you need to have enough good quality content to be better than your rival. I have no doubt in my mind the competition between the 3 is going to be a good thing for gamers, because we're going to see improvements and we're going to see additions to the games that make us want to play. And chances are, if Anthem and The Division really want to go for Destiny's jugular, they'll avoid price gouging the shit out of their fans and throw that shit in Bungie's face. The Division already announced their DLC is already going to be free. Anthem hasn't announced anything like that, but you can only imagine if The Division is doing something free, we might have to offer some pieces that are already free. Destiny, of course, will retaliate with their own methods of trying to keep gamers' attention, so expect some excellent fighting 6 months down the road. Hopefully, the game or games that you decide to invest the most time into out of the 3 actually survives that competition. Whether you have the time to play all 3, you have a sole preference for them, you like 2 out of the 3, or even all 3 but just can't play them all, not all of them are going to survive. It's just simple math. But watching them fight for your attention? Oh man, is that going to benefit players the same way it benefited sports gamers all those years ago, the same way it benefited Call of Duty and Battlefield when they were first starting to fight out with each other. Competition is good for gamers. I don't want anybody to mistake that for anything worse. Competition among the studios to make the best product possible is an absolute joy for players, because we're going to get the best products possible as long as they keep trying to innovate and create more content that their competitors don't have. So with all that being said, I'm dying to see which one of the 3 games people plan on playing. I'm really curious to see which one of the games people are saying, yep, that's the motherfucker I plan on playing. So anyways, as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Try not to glitch any more cabal into existence.